Good morning. This is Susan, and I will be reading the New Bedford Light on today is February 12th. The first article is Repatriation, a completion of the circle of life for Maya culture. New Bedford. On his face and in his silence, Antonio Collage Almos carried the weight of the world as he visited a nutrition store on Acushnet Avenue. For the day, it was briefly turned into a memorial for his wife, Nicolasa Ventura Kolash, 33, who died after a driver in an SUV hit her as she left a church service on the avenue early in the morning of January 1st. The Bristol County District Attorney's Office said they are pressing charges against a 16-year-old Dartmouth resident in relation to the collision. Hundreds had gathered to buy plates of carne asada, rice, tortillas, and salad to raise money for Kolash's funeral expenses. She's still at the mortuary, Almost told the Light in Spanish at the time. We don't know when we'll be able to send her back. The primary goal of the fundraiser was to raise what could be up to $12,000 necessary to repatriate Kolash's remains to Guatemala. Though it may be cheaper to bury her remains in the U.S., it is of utmost importance to the culture and beliefs of the Quiche community. To many people, the Guatemalan nation-state is an abstraction and their real connection is with their place of birth, said Lisa Maya Nauer, an anthropologist at the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth who works with the Quiche community. That is where the spirits of their ancestors are. You want to go back and kind of complete the cycle so your body will not be at rest until it returns to the place it began. Your spirit needs to be where there are other spirits that are part of its trajectory. What is repatriation? Patrick Saunders grew up in the Saunders-Dwyer Funeral Homes, founded by his grandfather in 1967. He took over the business as funeral director in 2015. It's the process of reuniting someone with their homeland, Saunders said. It's not extremely common, but we get them once or twice a year. The process is pretty straightforward, he said. Much of it involves the standard funeral costs, but the price climbs when it comes to paying an estimated $2,000 for the air cargo fare. The flight may be on a typical airliner, but there are added steps required, including an air tray to contain the hermetically sealed metal casket that holds the actual casket with the body. While there is no legal requirement that the body be embalmed beforehand, airline policies generally do require it. Saunders said his family's funeral business started to do repatriations in the 1990s, about the time that the city's Guatemalan community started to grow. Thankfully, I didn't have to start doing it, but I know my father and uncle had to figure out what we have to do in the process, he said. I remember when I was 17 or 18, I'd have to bring the passport to the Guatemalan consulate to have them canceled. Now the process of filling out the proper customs forms, canceling passports with the Guatemalan government, and arranging transport of the remains have become a solemn choreography for the business, right up to the last step when the body is transferred to a funeral official in Guatemala City. Either a receiving funeral home there picks up the body or the family does, and they have to pay a customs fee in Guatemala, Saunders said. And we found that if the funeral home paid it, it was less than if the family themselves did. All in all, the process generally costs around $9,000, Saunders said. He estimated that he has done about 15 such repatriations, with the vast majority of those to Guatemala. For Portuguese, it's not common that you send someone to Portugal, he said. Cape Verdeans, it's not common either. A lot of the time, our Portuguese and Cape Verdean families have a longer time in the U.S. Like anything else, there are different cultures, he said, and different customs and religious practices. The impetus for repatriation has its roots in Mayan spirituality, culture, and social structure before the Spanish conquest of the region in the 16th and 17th centuries. This is not, I think, unique to the Maya community, but it is true to some indigenous communities and a lot of indigenous communities in Latin America, she said. It goes back to a deeply rooted cultural belief system. Over the centuries, first under Catholicism and then under Protestant evangelicalism, authorities actively suppressed many traditional practices. Others fell by the wayside as Christianity took root. In the 1980s, as genocide made indigeneity itself dangerous, evangelicalism took over under the military rule of General Efrain Rios Montt. He imposed an evangelicalism throughout Guatemala, especially in indigenous communities. Some traditions refuse to die, including the belief in the soul's need for closure after death. The Christian religions have been hostile to traditional belief, Nauer said, but a lot of those beliefs have remained impervious. And one of those is belief in the deep connection between the living and the dead, she continued. This is very much a place-based culture where your tierra natal is very important. Nauer said the beliefs about the afterlife contend that to be at rest, one's body must return to the land where it was born. It is also the place to reunite with your ancestors. That is where the spirits of their ancestors are, so on the one hand, so you want to go back and complete the cycle. On the other hand, your body will not be at rest until it returns to the place its life began. You want to go back to where the umbilical cord is buried, she added. Something I can't read. Mas tortillas, por favor, Cristina Garcia Gonzalez shouted over the din at the tortilla sale. More tortillas, please. An assembly line of Quiche women, many from the San Andreas Sacabaya, Cola's hometown, formed an assembly line as orders streamed in. Gonzalez, who organized the fundraiser, said they sold 390 pounds of carne asada, totaling 500 plates that included rice, beans, and salad, to send Cole's remains home. God has called me to help those most in need, she said in Spanish, and this is one of those moments. Gonzalez found herself on the receiving end of such aid in 2021. In February of that year, a relative of hers was among the 55 killed when a tractor-trailer carrying 200 migrants crashed in the state of Chiapas, Mexico, bordering Guatemala. We did something here to raise funds and help the family out back home, she recalled. Coffee cans and boxes that bear the names of the deceased regularly appear at local Central American businesses soliciting funds for the repatriation. Apart from the material help the drives provide, it functions as a way to fortify connections within the community. Community is not a wealthy community, and it's not possible for a family to come up with the $10,000 or $11,000 it might cost on their own, Nauer said. It is very much a community thing that you bring people together, you compile what you can, you gather resources. Everybody chips in. Cole's remains arrived in Guatemala on January 29, her final journey delayed by a massive storm that dumped over a foot of snow in the region. This is the Maya version of the circle of life, Nauer said. Life and death are intertwined and independent. Trump proclamation aims to unleash commercial fishing in Atlantic. President Donald Trump has reopened a long-running fight over ocean conservation and fishing rights, ordering commercial fleets back into federally protected waters off New England and setting up another legal showdown. Trump on Friday revoked Biden-era restrictions and again opened the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument, about 150 miles off Cape Cod, to commercial fishing. The move drew criticism from environmental advocates and prompted the Conservation Law Foundation to say it is prepared to sue once again. The decision reignited a decade-old conflict between the fishing industry and conservation groups over the fate of nearly 5,000 square miles of deep-sea canyons and underwater mountains that scientists say shelter rare corals, endangered whales, and fish. In his proclamation, Trump said the ban on commercial fishing was unnecessary, writing that appropriately managed commercial fishing would not put the objects of historic and scientific interest that your monument protects at risk. He argued that many fish in the area are highly migratory and not unique to the monument, and that a host of other laws enacted after the Antiquities Act provide specific protection for other plant and animal resources both within and outside the monument. The move marks the fourth time in less than a decade that a president has flipped federal policy on the monument, underscoring how sharply divided elected officials, advocates, and coastal communities remain. The Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument was created in 2016 by President Barack Obama under the Antiquities Act, protecting 4,913 square miles of ocean where the Atlantic meets the continental shelf. Recreational fishing was allowed, but commercial fishing was banned. The area includes 3 underwater canyons, deeper than the Grand Canyon, and 4 seamounts, extinct underwater volcanoes that rise thousands of feet from the ocean floor. The monument protects habitat for endangered sperm, fin, and sea whales, Kemp's Ridley sea turtles, seabirds, and fragile deep-sea corals, some thousands of years old. In 2016, then Secretary of State John Kerry said reckless fishing practices were decimating marine resources. Trump first reversed Obama's decision in 2020, lifting the commercial fishing ban while leaving the monument's boundaries intact. President Joe Biden restored the prohibition in 2021, citing the area's unique geological features that anchor vulnerable ecological communities threatened by various uses, climate change, and related impacts. Trump's Friday proclamation again returns policy to his 2020 approach. Trump's order relies heavily on existing federal protections, arguing that laws such as the Endangered Species Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and the Magnuson-Stevens Fishery Conservation and Management Act already safeguard vulnerable species and habitats, making a commercial fishing ban unnecessary. Environmental groups counter that those protections are not substitutes for a fully protected marine monument and warn that allowing commercial fishing risks turning the area into what they call a paper park. The Conservation Law Foundation told the State House News Service it is prepared to sue the administration once more. The group called Trump's action a flagrant abuse of executive power that will pave the way for destructive activities that harm coastal communities, marine life, and ocean health. CLF said the decision is illegal and flies in the face of public opinion, citing a 2022 poll of 3,500 New Englanders showing more than 80% favored permanently protected ocean areas. The Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument is a biodiversity hotspot and one of the most biologically productive areas in the Atlantic Ocean. It deserves our full protection, said Erica Fuller, senior counsel at CLF. This latest attempt by the Trump administration to undermine the monument is not only unlawful, but it also demonstrates a blatant disregard for the health of our oceans. We will not stand by while his administration destroys vital habitats that are irreplaceable in our marine environment. We've fought this battle before, and we are ready to fight it again. CLF, along with the Natural Resources Defense Council and the Center for Biological Diversity, sued the Trump administration over the 2020 proclamation and intervened in a 2018 federal suit challenging the monument's creation. According to CLF, both the Federal District Court and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit ruled that the monument was created legally. The group says Trump again lacks authority to roll back core protections. Fishing industry advocates applauded the decision. By reopening the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts to commercial fishing, fairness, transparency, and science-based governance has been restored to the affected fisheries, said Bob Vaness, executive director of Saving Seafood. Vaness said Trump's action reflects a clear understanding of a simple truth. Commercial fishing in the United States is already governed by the most comprehensive science-based, and publicly accountable regulatory system in the world, pointing to the Magnuson-Stevens Act. He criticized the original 2016 designation as a unilateral decision that excluded fishermen without public hearings, without cost-benefit analysis, and without input from those whose livelihoods were affected. Mayor John Mitchell of New Bedford, home to the nation's highest value fishing port, warned Congress during a hearing in 2016 that the monument designation process risked sidelining fishing communities. Appearing before the House Natural Resource Committee shortly after the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Marine National Monument was created, Mitchell said the process lacks sufficient amounts of all the ingredients that good policy making requires: scientific rigor, direct industry input, transparency, and a deliberate pace. Scientists and environmental groups offer a different opinion. The monument supports amazing species from the seafloor to the sea surface, and we see evidence of that during every aerial survey. Removing protections for the monument puts these species at risk, said Dr. Jessica Redfern, Associate Vice President of Ocean Conservation Science in the New England Aquarium's Anderson Cabot Center for Ocean Life. Scientists say the steep underwater terrain of the protected area creates nutrient-rich upwelling that supports dense marine life, from plankton to the world's largest animals, including blue whales. Comments policy. As an independent, nonpartisan news outlet dedicated to diverse community voices, the New Bedford Light welcomes guest comments. Please be civil, courteous, and respectful. All comments are reviewed before posting. West End Dilemma: keeping neighborhoods' character or add needed housing. A proposed housing development in the city's West End has triggered a controversy, pitting the city's need for additional housing against Black and Cape Verdean residents who say they want to protect their community from overdevelopment, traffic congestion, and gentrification. Congregants of the United House of Prayer for All People and other West End residents oppose the proposed three-story housing development. It would abut their church, founded in 1921, which has been described as a sacred and historic site of African American and Cape Verdean history. They say it doesn't fit the character of the neighborhood and that they have not been afforded an opportunity to voice their concerns. The developer, Tracy White, proposed building 9 condominiums on a vacant lot next to the church, with 15 parking spaces, after reducing the project from 15 units due to neighborhood concerns. The Planning Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals will consider the proposed development at their April meetings. White said he proposed the project because of the housing shortage in New Bedford. He said he has no plans to scrap the proposed development. Having more housing in New Bedford is what they've been asking for, White said. This is a perfect opportunity and a great location for people to own a place to live. Josh Amaral, director of the city's Office of Housing and Community Development, wrote in a statement to the Light that the project would create much-needed home ownership opportunities for residents. We trust the developer will continue to engage in good faith with neighbors and city boards through the permitting and board review processes, Amaral wrote. In a revised proposal for design, the developers scaled down the project from 15 units to 9 units and from 4 stories to 3 in response to neighborhood feedback. The new proposal decreased the height of the building, eliminated a ground-level garage, and incorporated the parking spaces. The original plans also had balconies on every unit. Balconies will now only be on the rear side of the building, which faces the church, according to David Davignon, a professional engineer working on the project. More green space has been added to create outside space for residents, which reduces the building's carbon footprint. White said there are no current plans for further alterations, and he is nearly ready to submit the revised plans to the city's zoning and planning boards in April. Some councilors would support cannabis lounges if cigar bars return, too. The state has legalized marijuana lounges, but local permission is required. The grass may soon be a little greener in New Bedford. Local politicos are hashing out their differences over a new way to increase a pot of tax revenue. Pot. Cannabis consumption lounges are legal in Massachusetts as of 2026, and New Bedford City Council has a hankering to lighten the tax load. Lounges can create jobs, said Ian Abreu, longtime counselor. They can attract visitors and tourists who want social cannabis spaces, and local tax revenue from hospitality and cannabis licensing can help our city budget. The city council's normally crossed left and right wings have aligned behind a cautious optimism that cannabis lounges, with the proper regulation, could be pretty dope. In short, yes, said Ward 3 Councillor Sean Oliver, adding that any decision should be made with community input and carefully consideration of zoning, health, and safety standards. Councillor Shane Burko staked out similar ground. My approach would be to evaluate a proposal carefully rather than take a blanket position in advance, he said. I remain open to continued discussion. Mayor John Mitchell, in a statement made through his public information officer, wasn't so high on the idea. I am skeptical that residents would welcome cannabis lounges in their neighborhood, he said. With the legal availability of marijuana in Massachusetts, there is ample opportunity for private consumption that does not affect neighborhood quality of life. The highest hurdle, however, may not have anything to do with marijuana. Several city councilors, most vocally Ward 5's Joe Lopez, are trying their support to cannabis lounges to reallowing tobacco lounges and cigar bars. Lopez said he would support a 1-to-1 permitting policy that exactly balances the number of cannabis and tobacco joints in New Bedford. There's no reason to allow one but not the other. The Board of Health's stand against tobacco. New Bedford has no cigar bars or tobacco lounges today, and that's because of the city's Board of Health. Within its published tobacco regulations, the Board of Health created restrictions that include limiting the types of allowable nicotine products, prohibiting the sale of tobacco to anyone under 21, and outright banning tobacco smoking bars. Massachusetts, Nova Scotia announced partnership on offshore wind. The governments of Massachusetts and Nova Scotia signed an agreement Wednesday formalizing a partnership to develop offshore wind in their respective regions and share knowledge, workforce, ports, and potentially the wind-generated energy itself. The Memorandum of Understanding, signed by Governor Maura Healey and Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston, establishes the North Atlantic neighbors as leaders in offshore wind that have something to offer one another. We have this recipe of deep industrial ports, supply chain investment, trained workers, and strong coastal winds, said Healey, donning a red pantsuit in the same shade as the Canadian flag. Whatever actions may or may not be coming out of Washington, rest assured that here in Massachusetts, we're moving forward in any way which to bring more energy into this region, she said, and we're continuing with an international collaboration that helps us increase supply, lower costs, and brings economic development to our port communities. Massachusetts has been developing offshore wind for more than a decade. Through the build-out of Vineyard Wind, the state has established critical and expensive port infrastructure, a trained workforce, policy and regulations, and a deep catalog of lessons learned. But the investments are at risk of being stranded following attacks by the Trump administration that have seriously stalled further build-out. Meanwhile, Canada has land-based turbines but zero offshore. Nova Scotia, an eastern province about 1 million people that sits directly east of Maine, is looking to change that with a project called Wind West. It's still in its early stages, but the plan calls for at least 40 gigawatts of offshore wind energy, with construction starting as early as 2031. The province could be a lifeline for Massachusetts if projects like South Coast Wind and New England Wind stall long-term or pull out altogether. after the Trump administration suspended 5 under-construction offshore wind projects. The region's grid operator, ISO New England, warned that canceling or delaying projects will increase costs and risk to reliability. Now, Massachusetts and Nova Scotia say they will consider an interregional transmission system and explore the integration of offshore wind across the region. Massachusetts and Nova Scotia will examine potential energy pathways for delivering offshore wind energy from Nova Scotia to the New England grid, including bidirectional transmission options to allow for two-way transfers of offshore wind energy. New England already gets some energy from Canada in the form of hydropower from Quebec. While Healy remains a strong advocate for offshore wind, Houston has become a prominent voice for the industry here in the U.S. He emphasized his province's commitment to the industry on stage during an offshore wind conference in Virginia last year. Houston will be appearing again at the conference next week in New York to share his vision of building a binational energy alliance. Massachusetts Department of Energy Resource Commissioner Elizabeth Mahoney is also set to speak on a panel about how Canada and Massachusetts can partner on offshore wind. With the Vineyard Wind project nearing completion, Massachusetts is well positioned to share its sector experience with Nova Scotia, and Mahoney, in a statement, said Wednesday. This partnership creates an opportunity to learn from each other and coordinate on grid integration, ports, and workforce needed to support successful offshore wind deployment across the region. How does the Student Opportunity Act work? Several years into Massachusetts education funding reform, gateway cities have more staff to help high-need students. Does the reform need more funding, more accountability? Into Massachusetts education funding reform, the Student Opportunity Act, the state has poured millions into high-need districts, often urban and high-poverty districts. The state's new spending formula rolled out in 2021 has helped New Bedford pay for more counselors, nurses, and other staff, but low test scores persist. The Student Opportunity Act revised the spending formula within Chapter 7, the state's primary school funding law, and increased Chapter 70 funding by a projected $1.5 billion across its 7-year rollout. Its goal was to close academic achievement gaps. Districts with high populations of students with disabilities, students from low-income families, and students of color or English learning students receive the most in Student Opportunity Act funding. Roughly 3/4 of the additional aid has been directed toward gateway cities like New Bedford, but achievement gaps remain. Andrea O'Leary, New Bedford Public Schools Superintendent, said the district has used Chapter 70 aid money to hire support staff, including paraprofessionals, behaviorists, and health aides, especially for students with disabilities. He said with district's efforts to build inclusive environments, student achievement will grow and achievement gaps will be lower. The New Bedford Public Schools intend to close achievement gaps by allowing all students to receive instruction in standard classrooms with guidance of in-class support staff rather than pulling high-need students out of the classroom to receive additional instruction. And that was the New Bedford Light for February 12th. Have a great afternoon.